Welcome back to Type 40 here for Whovember with me, Dan Hadley, Birmingham's King of the Geeks, and returning guest, friend of the channel, the writer and massive Doctor Who fan, Will Hadcroft. Welcome back, Will.
Thanks a lot, Dan. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, I'm delighted because when we last spoke, we kind of left it hanging, didn't we? We left it hanging there in midair at a very precise point in Doctor Who history, didn't we? When the TARDIS had gone flying off into the ether again, we weren't sure whether it was going to come back. And so it struck me that this was the perfect place to pick it up with us at this point in Doctor Who history, too, because we're on the threshold of Doctor Who's latest third TV comeback, aren't we?
I suppose we are. It does. It's funny how it does feel like that as well. That this is. I know Russell T Davies has said it's something of a soft reboot, but it does feel like that. It feels like we're starting again. Yeah.
It just brings to mind to me the first time that Russell T Davies brought the show back from the depths 2 decades ago now. Can you believe that? I mean, I know it was announced well over 20 years ago now, but I think they were about to start filming in the February or March of 2004. And because the series had disappeared, hadn't it, in rather a cloud and looking a little unloved as a regular show. It was going out to 7:30, wasn't it, on a Wednesday night, 7:35, opposite Coronation Street. And it was popular with the people who were patient enough to hang the course, wasn't it? And it had got acclaim from the people who were paying attention. But it was still an ignominious end for 26 years worth of television. And to come back 7 years later, just for one night with a fabulous lead actor, an amazing set, and to really make waves, that TV movie did get people to sit up and pay attention, didn't it? And yet nothing. Radio silence again, and we had to sort of wait it out, didn't we? So through the late 90s and into the early noughties, did your interest flag? Did you move on to other things, or was Doctor Who was always there, that special place in your heart?
Yeah, Doctor Who was always there. I'd become an avid follower of Big Finish Productions by then, and I bought everything from Signs of Time up until and including Zagreus, their 40th anniversary. I think it was their 40th anniversary release. Yeah. So early on with the classic Doctors, I bought practically everything up until Zagreus, and then I sort of dipped in and out thereafter. But with the Paul McGann stuff, I got everyone. I loved his second season with Charlie particularly.
Me too.
And I've got to a feeling, because I couldn't see it coming back to television anytime soon, to be honest. Not that I didn't want it to, I just didn't see it happening.
Just didn't think it was a likely prospect.
I just thought, well, these Big Finish things are pretty good quality stuff, The classic series audios, there's a lot of love and attention into making those, the right sound design, the right kind of music, the correct versions of the theme tune. Stuff
so evocative, wasn't it? Evocative and painstaking.
Absolutely. And also they would progress certain things so far, but no further, because in the classic series, certain aspects never went any further, and they remain true to that. Whereas with the Paul McGann one, he was very much the current Doctor, and they could progress it. He was, to all intents and purposes, the new series. So I'd got to a point where I thought, you know what, I don't care if it never comes back to television if we still get these. And then when it did come back to television, a good friend of mine who's part of it all told me that Big Finish was in danger of closing down for a period of time. And I was really not thrilled with that at all, because they'd kept the boat afloat, in those years when nobody else was interested except for us. Thankfully, they have stayed afloat and produced many fine things since. But that's where I was back then in 2003. I was hooked on the Paul McGann audios and the classic ones, and was happy for it to stay like that forever.
So when you saw the teaser trailer and the posters start to appear and the casting announcements and everything start to, it really gathered, didn't it, over quite a short period of time. We heard it was coming back. This is always the case, isn't it, with modern television? You hear that something's going to happen, and then nothing, and then there's nothing again. And after a few weeks, you think, did I imagine that? Because the waters go completely still.
Was it 2003 that it was first announced?
That's right, yeah.
That Russell T Davies was involved.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, oh, that's that guy who did Queer as Folk. And I don't know if The Second Coming had aired by then, but
it had,
It had. So when they announced that Christopher Eccleston was their doctor, I thought, this could be quite interesting, and obviously it meant it was serious. We'd had so many rumours over the years of it coming back and who was involved and who was going to do it, and then nothing happened. But you knew with that announcement, well, first of all, you knew that Russell T Davies was a big fan of Doctor Who. It was already known that he loved it. But to name the actor Christopher Eccleston, and the BBC issued the statement, so you knew then it was real.
Had you permitted yourself to get invested in that discussion we all have with ourselves? Who should be the next Doctor? Well, I think it should be Hugh Laurie. I think it should be Richard E. Grant. I think it should be. Did you go through all of that, or did you just sit back and think, well, this hasn't happened for a very long time, whatever, I'll think about it when it happens. I'll decide whether I'm interested or not when it happens. Or did you find yourself getting pulled in to all the habits that we have as fans, that we lived with in our youth? Did all that stoke up immediately out of nowhere?
Pretty much.
Me too. I'm not judging you, mate.
Before Christopher Eccleston was announced, I'd heard that Bill Nighy was being considered.
He was the big one, wasn't he?
And I thought, oh, yeah. Because in my mind, the Doctor is an eccentric, middle-aged Englishman, right? Yeah. I appreciate that things are going in a different direction now. But the archetypal Doctor Who, set by William Hartnell and the people who created that series, was someone who was eccentric, slightly aloof, had certain alien qualities, but was also quite human at the same time. And that sort of Edwardian / Victorian silhouette.
He filled that. He absolutely filled that, didn't he? That all of those things, yeah. Quotas.
So I was thinking of the Doctor Who's of old and thinking, yep, Bill Nighy, I'll have that.
Didn't quite work out that way, did it? Did you also find yourself as well? Did you also find yourself as being a Doctor Who fan and people being aware that you were a Doctor Who fan? When word got around that it was coming back, did other people ask you, people at work or in your family, oh, yeah, I hear Doctor Who's coming back. Who's going to be the Doctor, Will? Did people ask you as if you had some sort of inside information?
Yeah. They were curious about it, really. Because in their minds, it was this cheap old kiddies thing, It was always regarded as a children's program.
So in their heads, it was the equivalent of bringing back rickets or milk rationing, things like that.
It was. They saw it as a children's program. It's Aliens in the Family or whatever, one of those sort of children's BBC type things. So they were curious about it. Christopher Eccleston, is going to be Doctor Who. How will that work?
Well, not many people knew the actor by name, did they? It's that guy from. He was one of those actors, wasn't he? They knew that they knew him from somewhere.
I don't know if it's because I live up north and he's a bit of a hero of ours, I think, Chris Eccleston.
Oh, is that true? Okay, yeah.
Well, it's just my opinion. Maybe he isn't, but I think that because he's a northerner, I grew up in Little Hulton, the same town that he grew up in.
Oh,
I went to the same secondary school that he went to. He's 5 years my senior, so he must have just left as I arrived. And so every time I saw him on television, that Christopher Eccleston, he went to my school, he grew up in my town.
That's nice.
So I think where I live, we did know who he was.
And so that actually only made you more interested in what was happening, and perhaps that part of you that had been maybe worried that you were going to lose Big Finish that you'd had as your companion while the show was off. Did choices like Christopher Eccleston, did you think, oh, it's as if they're actively courting me personally?
Then I imagined that he would have an Edwardian silhouette and that he would posh his voice up to sound a little bit more PR, you know. Yeah. I assumed his hair would be longer than it was. I imagine him wearing a big coat, a coat right down to his knees. There was an episode of The League of Gentlemen that he was in.
And he wore a great big fedora, didn't he, with a feather in it?
Yeah, and a big long coat. And he put on a bit of a posh voice for that character. So I was recalling that and thinking that would look good as Doctor Who. So it's a bit of a shock when I saw what he was going to be like.
Because realistically, he did, in some respects, when you hear the actor speak in interviews from the time, he went to great lengths, didn't he, to say, he's not going to be foppish, he's not going to wear this and that and the other, he's not going to... He gave, not a long list, but there was a very firm list of things the character wasn't going to be. And yet, in many ways, he was exactly like everybody that had come before, because he most of the people who'd come before, in that he played largely himself. That was how he interpreted the character.
I remember it vividly that he said, I'm not a toff, I'm not an aristocrat, my Doctor. And I thought, but Chris, you are. That's the whole point of this character. He is a lord and he is a toff, but he's turned his back on it. And that's the character you're playing. It's like someone in the House of Lords one day getting sick of it all and walking out and then taking on a secret persona, so that people don't really know who he is and where he's from. But he hates the society he's turned his back on, really, and can't get as far away from it as possible. And really, the way Chris plays it, whether he intended it or not, does come across like that. And but he came across as quite angry in that interview. Now, I don't know if the anger was fueled by what was going on behind the scenes, because he already knew by then he was going. We didn't, but he did. So maybe some of that angst that comes over in that interview is coming from what's going on privately in his life and with the production.
If it's the same interview I'm thinking about that you're referring to, he seems like a man who's just run a marathon.
They ask him in it, so are you going to stay for the long haul? And he says, I've done the long haul.
Yeah, I remember that. And
I thought, oh, that sounds a bit ominous. But I didn't twig that meant I'm off. I've had enough of this. I'm going. So and also the jacket and the hair. I assumed that was he was just dressed like that to go on BBC Breakfast.
Well, I remember, Will,
I didn't think it was going to be the costume.
The first time I saw some location photographs of them filming it, it was during the recording block of Aliens of London.
Right.
And they'd taken some snaps, the way that they do, of extras hanging around and crew with lighting gear and cameras and all that kind of thing. And it was just a picture of him, and he was about to cross a road, and just in that jacket with the sweater, with that sort of dark red sweater and the cropped hair. And I couldn't believe my eyes, because this is actually him. This is the Doctor. This is my first look at the Doctor. So it wasn't a posed for photograph in some studio with him sort of doing that with his hand, the way that they do, or holding the Sonic the way nothing like that. It was just a really casual picture. And it was the complete opposite, exactly as you've described. I'd expected him to at least wear a cravat, man, for Christ's sake. I expected something quirky, some note. No matter how much he protested about nothing foppish, I expected something to be. This is Doctor Who. Yeah. But when I saw the photograph, I was shocked at first. And then I looked closer at the jacket and saw how beaten up it was and how lean he looked. And I went from being mildly appalled to being fascinated. And obviously that compulsion to need to see it, that just stoked up even more. For some reason, I had every faith in him. And I
had no doubt he could do it as an actor. No doubt at all.
See, I was one of those people who'd loved him in other things, but when he was cast I just couldn't see it. I hope they've got this right. But I'd got a lot going on in my life at that time. I think it's the same thing. I'd been without it for so long. I thought if it comes back and it's good, then it's just a plus. I haven't lost anything because I haven't got the show at the moment anyway. You know, I'd got to that really pragmatic place about something that I'd been so that I felt the loss of so deeply 10 years earlier. And the movie, the TV movie, had been all well and good, but because we kind of knew that wasn't going to go to a series by the time it premiered in Britain, I hadn't allowed myself to get bitten too deeply by that. So this was a case of, you know, okay, you know how to play this. Just take it. Just take each announcement for what it is. Don't get too excited. Let's see what happens. And I allowed myself to be excited once they confirmed the other writers that were attached to it. And Mark Gatiss, Paul Cornell, Stephen Moffat, those names. I thought, okay, now I can take my excitement up another level. You know, so I got there very, very gradually. And even by the time the first teaser trailer came on, which I think was on New Year's Day of 2005, it was either on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, 2004, 2005, just to disappear and reappear in TARDIS with its almost time.
Oh, yeah.
Tracking across the screen. And even that, you heard a crash and there was a little bit of dialogue, which people on Gallifrey Base lost their minds about. They've both been miscast. It's awful. But even with that, I took that and I thought, oh, well, that sounds okay. And then I was able to put it to one side and wait another 3 or 4 months.
That's the trailer there, where it starts with the camera panning across the moon,
right.
isn't it? And then straight down into London.
Yeah.
And then you just hear him go, "Run for your life."
That's the one.
Now, when I heard that, I thought, oh, yeah. I like the sound of it. The look of it, I mean, we're looking at it there. It took me a good while to get used to that. I saw that still shot of him with the Eye of London across the way and him running. That would have been where he went fantastic and then started to run. And it was a still shot of that and the red telephone box down at the other end. And I remember thinking, oh, he is wearing that jacket. That is his costume then. And I just couldn't buy into that at all. So I thought, oh, well, I'll wait until I see it. Yeah, wait till I see the episodes. He might sell it to me then. And then when I watched Rose, when I watched Rose, he sold the character to me in that first episode. But I didn't get the costume until they started drip feeding the Time War stuff. Is it at the end of the second episode where he says, "My planet burned," and you think all this is going to last forever, and then he says, "There's been a war between my people and the Daleks."
Because it's as if he's wearing that big leather coat, that thick leather, heavy coat, because he needs something that would that could be exposed to the elements. It was something that he was wearing was practical rather than decorative or expressive. This version of the character was fighting small fires, and he was living a functional existence and helping where he could, and he was a duty. It speaks of duty, service.
I got the feeling it was a sort of I'm really not in the mood for scarves and frilly shirts. You know, he's the sole survivor, he believes, of his own race. So the costume fit then, the short hair, the battered jacket. And I like the fact I could never tell whether it was black or brown. It depended on how the light caught it. Yeah. You know, that was a nice touch as well. I don't know if that was deliberate, but I remember the costume designer saying that they went round different jackets till they found the one. I think he went with her until they found the one that they felt was right. And then they did a cut of this particular jacket to fit him.
Oh, I see.
So it was very well thought out.
From what I remember, there was 2 or 3 of them, and that's why it confused me. I didn't find out there was 2 or 3 of them until a few years later, because they do look, because the colour does look quite different in some photographs and in some episodes. So I did always wonder about that. But it was such a heady time, Will, and because the public got so excited about it, so invested in it over that 3 months, even with the shock announcement pretty much right away that he wasn't going to be there for very long. It didn't seem to stop the British public from rushing to this show week on week on week on week. It didn't just seem to increase its viewership. I'm not sure whether that literally happened week on week on week. I think it did. But the conversation around it, that really did build by the week, to the point where people by weeks 9, 10, 11, everybody was on the edge, weren't they? People were counting the days. People who weren't even geeks were counting the days for this show to come back. And there we were, the people, the outsiders, the people who had been all right to mock us for loving this show, just as we talked about before. All of a sudden, we were on the inside of something that everybody else. But they don't just say that that they, I love this now. There was a bit of a phenomenon where you'd find people who were claiming that they'd always loved it. And you thought, well, where were you? Where
I actually resented that at the time.
I can see why people
quite deeply. I remember I used to work in a service centre for a bank. So it's all processing written instructions. And in this office, I would hear people talking, I'm a Doctor Who fan, they would say of themselves. I think, you're a Doctor Who fan? You weren't before this year, So the thing that was once a laughing stock, and where everybody made you feel like you were a laughing stock, suddenly it was cool, and everybody loved it. And I resented that quite deeply at the time, because I thought, how shallow, Now it's got a few quid spent on it, and a reputable actor in the lead role. And Billie Piper has proved everybody wrong about her acting. She is good. And the style of it and the tone of it and the contemporary look of it. That was one thing I didn't like, that it seemed a bit too contemporary, but it was working. I'll give Russell T Davies his due. That real contemporary feel.
And sound.
They all keyed into it. Yeah, they all keyed into it. I remember a guy, his mobile phone went off in the office, and it's and he
really?
answers the phone, and I thought, blimey, he's got it as a ringtone. But
did you find
it was
any
just
of this
weird? It was just weird to go from, you like that silly cheap children's show, do you? And then suddenly everybody loves it. And I remember there was
Did you feel vindicated by any of this?
I did in the end, because those who got hooked on it in its then current incarnation would catch bits of old ones whenever they were broadcast, wherever, and then they would realize, actually, there's not that much difference. The Doctor, the TARDIS, the Daleks, the theme tune, the title sequence, it really is, not always, but in a lot of cases, it really is the fact that it was made on the cheap. That's what's different about it. And they recognize that all the key components are there in the old stuff.
Yeah.
But they used to laugh at me for liking that. And
I
I find that fascinating, that they then revisit the old stuff in retrospect, because they've now got this brand new sparkling thing that they love so much, that they start to see the same elements in the old stuff and like the old stuff.
People are always very honest about the main reason they didn't like it. It's because it looked so cheap. So it comes back and it looks the business, or it certainly looks indistinguishable from other genre shows that had been popular at the time. The Stargate stuff was still going. Star Trek had just disappeared, but I certainly think that its production values stand up to any of that stuff. And so it was sort of okay to get behind this, that it wasn't just this naff old show from way back.
Yeah. I had a friend of the family years ago, before I was married even, and she came round with her husband to visit me and my mum, and I was sat in the kitchen with a portable television wired up to a video recorder and watching the Five Doctors in the kitchen, and the husband comes in and goes, "Oh, Doctor Who, Doctor Who." And it's the bit where the Cybermen are getting massacred by the Raston Warrior robot. And, oh, great. And he's pulling up a chair alongside me. And then his wife comes in and goes, "Oh, what's going on in here?" And then she catches the portable television and goes, "Oh, Doctor Who, pie in the sky rubbish, pie in the sky. Come on." And she literally drags her husband out to go and sit and talk to my mum, when he clearly would have liked to stay with me watching the Five Doctors. Now, fast forward to 2005, and me and my wife bump into this couple. And that lady confesses to me, because they did their shopping on a Saturday. She confessed to me that she says to her husband, "Come on, John, we've got to get this done because we've got to get back for Doctor Who." So it's gone from pie in the sky rubbish to we've got to get our shopping done pronto and get back for Doctor Who. Now, I don't think she'll have remembered what she said to me some years previous. But I never forgot it.
Victory, a standing victory for new Doctor Who when it could reach people like that who'd been so outwardly dismissive, if not hostile towards it. Will, what a fabulous story. More Type 40 for Whovember coming up. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, check you're still subscribed, and hit the cloister bell to get all the notifications about what's coming next and when. I'll be picking up another story with Will next time.